Ever wonder what happens when a strategy consultant and a speaking coach walk into a podcast studio? Yeah, us too. But here we are.
Turns out, the answer involves a lot of coffee, a few bad jokes, and some pretty great conversations about things that actually matter in the working world, beyond the business cards.
We're talking real stories, real insights, the highs, the lows, and maybe even the office snacks that keep us going.
So if you're here for a laugh, a little inspiration, or just curious about what two corporate casualties have to say, you're in the right place. I'm Jeff.
And I'm Charlie.
And let's get
Casually Pro.
Pro.
Awesome. Oh, wow. Okay, well, we have a really interesting topic today. Jeff, you are a public speaking coach and a master of the skill of extroversion. But we are really interested in learning the difference between the two and any skills that might help one transfer to the other, or the other get some leg up to get closer to what they're looking for in a professional goal. So tell me about your experience with introversion and extroversion.
Actually, we might make a few people angry today.
Oh, no.
My experience and the research that I made on this topic lead me to now think that introversion is actually more a myth than a reality.
Really? You don't say. Okay. Can you expand on that?
The truth is it's flawed, but it's not just flawed in one way. It's flawed in so many ways. So first, when we talk about introverts and extroverts, we most of the time think about two very distinct groups of people. Like you're either an introvert, group A, or you're an extrovert, group B. So this is the first misconception. It's that it's not two poles, but it's actually more like a continuum. If you think of a straight line where you would have the extremes on both sides, there are just so many ways to be on this spectrum between introversion and extroversion. But that being said, this is not the real problem. The real problem is really what it is, what this measurement actually mean. What is this dimension that goes from introversion to extroversion? And when you deeply research into how it has been created, and it's not just introversion and extroversion, it's most of the psychological constructs. Even IQ could be considered one of those constructs, or any type of personality, any personality trait. So when it's how do you measure introversion and extroversion? It's not a physical thing that you can measure. There is no introversion or extroversion meter that you can use to measure a person. You do it by questions. Questions that can be as simple as, hey, usually, are you someone who talks a lot or not? When you're in a meeting, do you speak or you don't speak? Are you the type of person? Yeah.
Yeah. Listen,
The list goes on and on.
yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot to be said about kind of classifying where you fall on this spectrum of introversion and extroversion. But, I can't help think of my own experience starting as what I would consider a classic introvert, someone who just wanted to stay at home, do things by himself, things of that nature. But there were times when I found myself really interested in something and really excited to share it with other people, where I felt like that was more of an extrovert experience. Could you maybe break down if there's a difference between being on that spectrum anywhere at all points in the time, or do you feel like there are people who can go back and forth between the two extremes?
We pack things together. That's the thing.
Mhm.
When we say an introvert is someone who has certain characteristic, like talking to new people, initiating discussions with people that you don't know, or just taking space. And this is completely dependent of the context. You know,
Mhm.
you could have one of those so-called introvert traits in a certain group on a certain day and not with another group, or not with the same group but on a different day. It changes a lot more than what we think when we talk about introversion.
So what you're saying is there not only is it a continuum, but it's an ever fluctuating state of being, right? It's more about a situational version of yourself that can change from experience to experience.
Oh, it's worse. It's a lot worse than this.
Oh my
Because
goodness.
what would be considered, you know, everyone's different. So if you say that a certain type of behavior is introvert, you could have two introvert people or three, and they would not share the same types of behaviors.
Can you expand on that?
Yes, so for example, you could be introvert like because you don't speak to people that you don't know. That's you could consider yourself introvert, and you could be someone who can speak in public. But you
Mm,
could have another person who's introvert, who consider themselves introvert and who scores on the introversion scale, but who would be completely not comfortable to do public speaking and thinking that's because they are introverts, but who have no problem in certain contexts to speak to people that they don't know.
fascinating. So it's not just okay, you wake up one day uh and go to work and you are feeling more extroverted that day, so you have an experience that is more akin to that. You're talking to people, you're enjoying people, but it's more contextual to individual experiences with how they interact with others or that experience in and of itself. So it can change not just a day to day, moment to moment, but it can also change with the breadth of individual interaction that you can have, right? If you are much more comfortable speaking to hundreds and thousands of people all at once, but having a one on one conversation makes you feel like you want to die a little on the inside, that's a perfectly normal response. That's what you're telling us.
Actually, it's yes, it changes, but you might not necessarily see it yourself. And not there is a dark side to this psychological construct that we call introversion and extroversion. You know, if you consider yourself an introvert and you go to a new situation, what will you do? If you think you're an introvert, chances are you will stay quiet.
Interesting.
Whereas if you didn't know about it, if you've never read about introversion, you might as well spoken up.
Okay, so we kind of put that context on ourselves then. If I was someone who was more naturally, I guess, quote unquote, farther on the side of the spectrum towards introversion, but I never tried to consider myself or label myself as an introvert, I could, in effect, make myself more extroverted. Is that what you're trying to say?
Oh yeah, look at it this way. If you're like most people, you have situations in which you're mostly quiet, and you have other situations where you're the one talking all the time. You know, typically you could be quiet in at work, but you could be very talkative with friends or with your family or with a group that shares a hobby or sports, for example. Or you could be an extrovert at work because that's the domain in which you feel very competent. But you might be completely quiet if you go to an event that's like a professional event in a field that is different than yours.
So you're saying that part of extroversion isn't just understanding and being comfortable with a particular area, but it's also competency in that area.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the one of the issue here is that many people consider themselves introverts in situation when what they are actually doing is either they're facing social anxiety or they don't feel confident
Mm,
or it's a situation that they never practiced so they don't have skills or they could just not wanting to talk and then there would be no problem in that.
fascinating. So, you know, kind of touching a little bit on your work here, I am interested to see how you maneuver this into your kind of professional background. For those of you who don't know, Jeff is a very accomplished public speaking coach, and he works primarily with tech CTOs and tech executives. Um, and so these are individuals that are incredibly talented and skilled in their fields. And so, in my mind, they have the highest level of competency when it comes to being able to speak about their area. But a lot of them have difficulty breaking into public speaking or developing confidence around their speaking in general. So, how do you reconcile that difference of very competent professional and someone who just can't speak about that competency?
Yeah, it's very easy for me because it was my case. You know,
Mm,
I fell in love with computers when I was a teenager. I learned programming and I really spent all my nights and weekends and evenings and holidays behind my computer, being a teenager and being a young adult. And then I became a software engineer and I was a freelancer. So always on the computer.
mm.
I became very good at technical skills. But of course, I had to sacrifice learning all those soft skills, speaking to people, communication, public speaking. And it's the same case with most of the people who are very high in competence in tech. You know, the reason is that you have to spend so much time behind your computer to become really good at tech and to really understand. It's a lot of reading, of experimenting. You can get amazingly good at tech while at the same time developing your communication skills. It's
Really?
completely different. It's like going in two directions at the same time. And you know how momentum is important when you learn something?
Hmm.
So imagine if you're constantly shifting your direction, it's really hard. And it's also hard because it feels like your brain is in a different state when you do this alone programming and learning versus communicating with people, being outgoing. So that's the reason usually people who are very good in tech are so bad at social skills. But there's hope because it's because they didn't learn it.
Really? Okay, that is a bold statement. Um, eh, so how does not learning these soft skills that are so influential for things like developing your own business or being successful inside of an organization, how does that translate to being better at soft skills later on?
Sorry, can you rephrase this question?
Yeah, so you said that part of their skill or part of their benefit for people who are more technically inclined is that they didn't learn these skills to start. And so now learning these soft skills is more efficient, or is it because they have more technical skills that they can speak about that make them more inclined to learn these soft skills?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I think I get it. Yeah. Truth to be told, it takes a lot longer to become great at understanding tech. Really have a deep understanding of your topic and be able to build things than to get good at communicating with people. I mean, if we just talk about the raw time that it requires, you have it's easier to have amazing results in the field of communication faster than to have amazing results in knowledge field like tech, because you can't fake expertise, so when you learn communication and you're already an expert, that helps a lot because you know that you know your topic. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's a lot harder, in my opinion, to reach a level of expertise in a tech when you're already a very good communicator.
Mm.
And one of the reasons is that if you're a good communicator and you face a problem, you're just going to find someone who can fix it for you. You will ask. But if you ask, you never learn how to do it yourself. So there's actually that's the reason why if you are people who don't ask for help, they can become extremely good at solving problems. But then, of course, it tends to backfire later in their career because they are unable to use leverage, and they tend to spend too much time solving problems that other people might be better suited than them to solve.
That it's so interesting because there's a very interesting parallel between tech and my background, which is finance. And what I found is being a young associate working on all sorts of complicated technical financial problems is that the ones that usually rise to the top are the ones that ask questions, even if it feels dumb, even if it feels like, oh, you should absolutely already know this. If they ask and they get a question, it's better to look stupid for maybe a day, but have the problem solved than it is to keep beating yourself up, trying to figure out an answer and then a deadline passes. And so I'm trying to kind of consolidate this idea that yes, it's better for uh, people to grow in their careers to do the work by themselves. But wouldn't you say that even at lower levels, the communicators end up having a leg up when it comes to upward mobility?
Oh yeah, of course. I didn't mean never ask questions.
Mm.
That, I think there is a balance here. Being stuck for too long, or sometimes looking for guidance, is the best thing you can do. But
Mm.
asking too fast, not taking the time to think by yourself and to find solutions before you ask. It's always better to first you think you have one or two drafts of a solution, but you're not sure, so you're gonna ask someone else. Then you do this two steps process. You think, you try to solve it, and then you just look for someone to tell you that if it's the right direction or not. So in this way, you can get the good of the two words.
Gotcha. So it's more like don't spoon feed them, but keep them from falling on their face.
Yeah, I think that's one way.
Well, this is really fascinating because I think a lot of people take time in their careers to try to become experts. And there's a massive upside to developing those professional skills right away. But there are tons of cases, especially in terms of visibility for individual expertise that prize the skill of communication above all else. And I think what you're trying to say is people who have a delicate balance of one side and the other generally find more success because they're better off holistically and excel in different paces throughout their career.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think having an experience gives you confidence in something. You know what it is to know a topic deeply. So you kind of know how expertise is shaped.
Mm.
And this also make your communication more efficient because you can better judge first the if the people you're talking to are experts or not. But you can also you're also better at asking the right questions.
Mm. It's a very difficult thing to ask the right question. And I think anyone can kind of get on board when it comes to really difficult technical solutions that 9 out of 10 times it's not about finding a complicated answer, but it's about finding a question or a series of questions that bring you to a simple, repeatable, and profitable solution. But changing pace here a little bit, I always heard, uh, you know, throughout my career that one of the most important things that you can develop is confidence. And I think you touched on it a little bit about developing your skill in terms of being able to speak intelligibly about your field or your area of expertise. But I can't help myself from thinking if someone tells you to be more confident, how do you do that?
Oh yeah, that's a great. I love this question, Charles. What's confidence? So there are
Mm,
two things here. There are feeling confident, which is one thing, and
mm,
there's acting confident.
right.
Usually, usually what people chase is feeling confident, and feeling confident is extremely easy. You just have to not take any risk. Do
Mm,
something that you master and that you did so many times you don't even have to think about, and don't take any risk, which would be extremely boring, maybe not even feasible because you would have to avoid so many things. So feeling confident might not be your best target.
mm,
Acting confident, that's something else. Acting confident is I able to do something that I don't have experience doing.
mm,
That's true confidence. It's I'm not sure, I'm scared, I have doubts, but I do it anyway. That's acting confident. And here the secret to increase your confidence, it's to act confident. It's to find all those actions that you would do if you were feeling confident. So you can ask yourself, if you were 100% confident, what would you do?
Interesting. So it's more of a visualization technique, right? If I have a really interesting and profitable solution for a problem that can only be uh, implemented if I talk to the CEO. And I picture myself saying, okay, well, I have this really great solution. I know I'm just an associate or a senior or a manager level, and I shouldn't be the one bringing this to you, but I think that it would save our company X amount of dollars a year. And you picture yourself doing that and it going well. You're saying that kind of
Oh, oh
visualization
no,
and development.
No, no. I mean, you can if you want to visualize things. I personally, I'm not able to visualize, so it's not
Mm,
something that I do, and I cannot do it. I don't have this visualization capacity. Few people in the population, so low percentage who cannot visualize. No, no, you don't visualize it, even if
mm.
you can, if you want. But the key is to do it. It's you see, it's not about visualizing. It's about doing it. So you don't visualize that you're going to the CEO talking about your ID.
Mm.
You get up, you walk to the to your CEO, and you tell him the ID.
Oh, okay. So, you know, I do something similar. Not so much the visualization route. Although every once in a while I like to imagine myself doing something bold, brave, and stupid. But I picture myself at maybe around 4 years old, and I'm right by the side of a swimming pool. And my mother is explaining that yes, the water is very, very cold. But once you jump in and the cold hits you right away, it starts warming up. And so for me, every action that I do that I'm nervous about, that I know I have to or I should do, I visualize, well, not visualize, but I create the scenario in my head that it's just cold water. That if I just do
Oh,
it, it makes my life better and it's easier. And afterwards, I don't have to worry. And you're saying that that is something that helps develop confidence over time.
yeah, there is a big part of it that is related to just being able to speak to another person.
Mm,
You know, Charles, you talked about this situation where you go to talk to the CEO about your ID. Of course, that might be extremely scary.
hmm
If you never did something like this, like talking to a random person in the street, you don't know that you have the skill to just talk to another person. You know, a big part
mm,
of confidence is just being able to talk. Because at the end of the day, talking to a neighbor or to a shopkeeper isn't that different than talking to a CEO. It's the same. It's the act of talking.
So, if I'm understanding this correctly, there is kind of a methodology behind creating confidence through speaking to people, and that's
Yeah.
take every opportunity you can to speak to a stranger or someone that you're not comfortable with, so that by the time you need to use that skill, the time you need to use that confidence, it's been built up in increments.
Yeah, the theory is actually pretty simple. You need to find those situations that bring discomfort.
Mm,
So for some people, talking to to their neighbor is already discomfort. So for
hmm
those people, that's their first step. For some people, talking to their neighbors is easy, but talking to someone in the street without having any reason is hard. So for those people, they would start with this. For some people, talking to anyone is easy, but they find it hard to talk to someone they find impressive, or
mm,
someone who is accomplished, or someone who's higher up in the hierarchy. For those people, that's their challenge.
hmm
Then there are other people who might think, yeah, but I'm having the fear to speak in front of an audience. So for those people, they start with a small audience and they speak. And you know, gradually, by doing it, you increase your confidence, you increase your comfort zone. And so the next step becomes less scary,
mm,
if I may say, you know. So if for now talking to your CEO is completely out of your reach, maybe start with something easier, with a manager, or go to a conference and speak to someone you feel impressed.
Mm.
and you build it like this.
Okay, fantastic. So essentially baby steps, but with the ultimate goal in mind of being able to talk to whoever you want or need to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's baby step. And there is one very great thing about those baby steps. You know, it's no step, if you do it progressively, no step is really harder than the previous one. You know, in terms of what you feel in your body, what discomfort you're facing, what's mental or emotional obstacle you're facing, it doesn't really increase. It stays mostly the same all the time. So by doing it again and again, you kind of develop this muscle of I'm able to act when I feel this discomfort. That makes it easier to do it the next time and easier the next time. And so you can develop the skills pretty fast.
So the argument isn't so much relieving discomfort, but it's creating mental fortitude to know that you can push past the discomfort.
Oh, yeah, the most powerful belief that you can build is if I'm feeling this discomfort right now, it means I have something to say.
Wow.
Because this discomfort that you only feel it when it's an important situation where there's something at stake, where you have something to gain, when it's something that matters. And only when there is something to say, your brain will not bring discomfort in you if there were just nothing. You would just not feel anything and you would not even have the idea of talking to this person. So whenever you're feeling this discomfort, this sensation, you can use it as a trigger and think, wow, my brain is now showing me that this is important. It gives me energy. Let's do it.
Interesting. So it's rewiring your brain to recognize discomfort as a means for action. Kind of the same way that if we put our hand on a hot stove, we don't just say, ow, oh, that's horrible. We pull our hand away. And that
Yeah,
action becomes the thing that we
yeah,
need to survive.
exactly. And Charles, this discomfort that we talk about, it's literally the brain giving you energy. That's why you feel this rush. That's why, and if you're a public speaker, you know that when you feel it, when you feel this sensation, oh, you will have a hell of a lot of energy that you can use on stage.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
true. I
literally
mean,
energy.
I mean, any time I've done a speaking engagement and I didn't feel that, I felt like my audience was going to fall asleep because I was not giving any energy whatsoever.
Yeah, that happens to many accomplished speakers. Once you, at first, you face a lot of discomfort and energy. Everything is a challenge.
Mm.
Then you might start to get used to certain types of audiences, or you might get used to your speech, and you might start to lose this feeling, and you also enjoy less when you speak like this.
Mm. So, speaking to the other spectrum, because I think we've paid a lot of attention to more of the introverted spectrum, the extroverted spectrum needs just as much care and consideration when planning their moves and their goals likewise, no?
Yeah, that's where the difference between introvert and extrovert is actually more blurry than anything else. I've had people who tell me they're identifying as extroverts who have no problem networking, but whenever they're in front of an audience, their brain freeze. Or they can speak to certain people, but not others.
Interesting. So we've covered this already on the podcast, but connection and networking is one of my fortes and something that I find a lot of passion in. But it's true that there are some connectors out there that find public speaking to be almost impossible, a mountain that they can't climb when for them moving mountains in the form of networking is very easy, and they end up knowing hundreds and thousands of people at a basis of which If they were all in a room together, they couldn't speak, but if they met them all individually, they could create incredible opportunities and be able to be like a fish in water. So I guess for people who have that disconnect one way or the other, how would you encourage them to broach betterment in terms of getting comfortable with the other side?
Yeah, it's a skill. It's really a skill. Like public speaking is a skill.
Mm,
It doesn't matter if you're introvert or extrovert to develop it. And conversely, networking and speaking to people at an event, it's a skill.
mm,
So many people, they don't have the skill. They think they're introvert and then they don't develop the skill. But if they develop the skill, they would learn to do it. They would enjoy it. And then they would reach this very weird point, Charles, that you
mm,
might know yourself. This point where you are in a networking event, just talking to everyone, and you start to wonder if introversion and extroversion is really a thing.
hmm. I never really considered the spectrum prior to our conversation before this, but I see it very often when I go out and about and I'm at a networking event and I see some people get really into networking, really enjoy themselves. And as the night goes on, people leave and the energy starts lowering and they almost turn into a different person. They're quiet, they're sitting at the bar, they're just enjoying this kind of lesser energy. And it always makes me wonder, did they always feel extroverted or did they just choose to be extroverted in that moment?
Or they're just drunk. No,
Listen,
no,
we
no, no, definitely. I think there is. It's important to tell our listeners who might not know it. There's a switch. There is like if you think you're an introvert, there are certain things that you can do during an event so that you suddenly switch and then you want to talk to everyone.
mm, what are some of those switches?
Ah, good question. The key is to initiate conversations. You know, most of the people, they think they're introverts. They wait for other people to talk to them. And so they're always reacting to what happens. But there is something really mm, meaningful when you start to initiate conversations, that you are creating something. You're not reacting anymore, you're creating.
Mm,
And usually, and I've worked with clients who told me they're shy, they're extremely introverted. And I used to be like them, let's say it was 8 or 10 years ago. Once they initiate a conversation to people that they don't know during those events, 3 times usually. So you go initiate a conversation with 3 people that you don't know. That's on average. Sometimes it works at 2, sometimes it takes 4. And then you feel that you want to talk to everyone.
so
You
it's
also, you also have to be open, of course. You if you're hiding something, or if you are not speaking in a like you really are or what you really think, it might lower the chances that it happens. But if you're open and you initiate to 3 people in an event, you want to talk to everyone.
mm, fascinating. You know, I think that this is an interesting opportunity to talk about a problem on the more extroverted side. So, generally, what I find is there are people, especially at networking events, that love talking to other people. But the problem is they get so wrapped up in what they're saying and how excited they are about a topic uh, that they kind of push it to the edge of what someone's attention is willing to keep, and it starts becoming a little bit extreme or very very boring, one or the other. What would you say to someone who has an issue finding out where to stop?
Oh yes, yeah, of course. There are always people who are at the other end of the spectrum and who need to learn the inverse skill. Yeah. Usually, when you want to change something that you are already doing, first you need to be aware of it.
Mm,
And what happens usually, you are at the beginning, you're aware of it, but only after it happened. So
right.
you are at the end of the event, and then you're like, I realized that I just talked and talked too much, and I didn't even ask questions to other people. That's the
Mm,
first step. You're aware and you want to change it. Then there comes the moment where you will be doing it. You will be in the situation, oh, I'm talking too much right now, and I'm aware of it. And at this, maybe the first few times you might not be able to change it because it feels, changing behavior is different. It's difficult.
mm,
Doing something different in a certain context for the first time, this requires some kind of effort that's that can be hard to display the first time you are in the situation. But after a few times, you will be in the situation, you realize that you talk too much, and that's when you do something different. So, for example, ask a question or told to the other person, I noticed that I've been talking and talking and talking, and see what the other person thinks. But asking questions, usually it's the best.
mm. So would you say that maybe it's prudent to go in with a questioning mindset as opposed to a uh, expositionary or I tell you mindset?
Yeah, it's like curiosity. It's
Mm,
asking question, but really being curious about the other person. I think it echoes the episode that we did, our last episode, Charles. You know that we said that one of the best mindsets of networking was to go there with this idea that there is something beautiful into everyone, and
mm,
your job is to find it.
absolutely. You know, I might be a little bit biased in this side, but I think when you really take the time to develop that curiosity, only good things come from it. You learn how to communicate better, but you also end up less boring because nobody loves anything more than to talk about themselves. And if you give someone an
Oh,
opportunity to do
oh
that,
yeah.
it's
A- And
phenomenal.
and I think they like it so much, Charles, because if you really try to find what's interesting and fascinating into a person, you will always reach this point where they talk about what they're really passionate about, what
Mm,
drives them, what energizes them. So they will talk and talk and talk, and they will feel energized, and they will feel great, and they will know that you show a deep interest into them. So they will like you.
true. 100% correct. Yeah. I think the best conversations I've ever had and the best people that I've ever conversed with were the ones that took a deep interest in what I cared about ultimately and said, yeah, Charlie, that's incredibly interesting and incredibly worthwhile knowing. And I just want to learn more. And for me, that always clicks in my head that that person is someone that I want to continue getting to know and continue developing a relationship with. So, we're talking along the lines of networking, but when it comes to public speaking, I think the opposite is kind of true, right? A lot of people l- tend to view the length at which their talk goes um, as almost too long, right? When in reality, they're moving very fast. There's a lot of difficulty trying to create length in a topic that you know a lot about, but the audience might not. And there are problems with pacing that create a lot of anxiety for people trying to develop this skill of public speaking. I found that when I started, I would always talk too fast. I would be slated for 5 minutes to speak, and I would speak for maybe two because I ran out of things that I wanted to talk about. Uh,
Mm.
and then eventually I would just ramble, and it would be nonsensical. So all of these problems are kind of the opposite of the extroversion side of talking too much. It's not having enough to talk about.
Because you talk too fast,
Mm,
or because your mind is in a state. You know, when you are not very used to public speaking, there's a lot of emotions involved.
mm,
There's a lot of stress. It can be very hard. I mean, for some people, it's paralyzing.
mm,
And you have just so many things that can make you anxious in those moments. Like any silence can make you anxious. Anytime people just look around or feel or you feel they're not interested can raise your anxiousness. You can feel anxious that you might not find something more to say. Usually, those issues that you mentioned are related to this fact. People try to avoid discomfort. And as a rule of thumb, and it's very effective rule that you can apply if you want to learn public speaking, everything that you feel brings discomfort, do it. And do nothing to remove the discomfort that you're feeling. I can give a few examples. If you're afraid of long silences, do it on purpose. If you talk too fast because you feel rushed, force yourself to talk slower. If you're afraid of not knowing what to say, you can just tell the audience, I forgot what I was about to say.
you know, that's
And
fair. That's an interesting concept because I think it if someone were to tell me outright that they didn't know what they were going to talk about next, but they didn't want me to suffer through them not knowing either, I would appreciate that. I would say, wow, that's an incredibly brave and honestly very thoughtful thing to say.
oh yeah, and it helps people who have this fear or who were paralyzed in the past. You know, I worked with people who had a bad experience of just losing all their mental abilities in front of an audience in the past,
Wow.
and who were afraid that it happens again.
Mm,
And usually it's what helps is, you cannot fake remembering what you forgot. So the only option that you have, it's what is happening right now. It's a big emotional moment. You're feeling deep stress. You try to find your words, but you don't remember. There's something that you have access to. It's what's happening right now. So you can say, I'm feeling very anxious right now. I forgot what I was about to say. Can anyone help me? What did I just say before? And usually the audience will help. Usually it will even have the added benefit that you will appear as human because most of the people in the audience are afraid to speak. And
mm,
so what I like in this case is that by admitting what's happening right now, you get sympathy, like I'm not sure sympathy is the right word. You appear closer to the audience,
mm.
so it might create a connection that is more intimate than if you were just a very good speaker.
I think I think it's empathy. No, you create this feeling of being like the other and understanding what the other person is going through. If I see someone who's stumbling on stage, I can say, yeah, I've been through that exact same experience. And so I feel less separated from them. It's more of an ability to create intimate connection through The realization that we're all human, we're all flawed.
And it's courage, someone who fear going on stage and who goes anyway. It's courage. Someone who's experienced and who loves going on stage. Okay, yeah, it might be great. It's a great moment. It can create many great emotions. Like it can show you that everything is possible. But it's not courage anymore when
Mm.
it's something that you used to do. When it's experience, it cannot be courage anymore. So it's a different emotion.
I never thought of it like that, but yeah, you're right. There's a unique benefit to being the amateur, which is people might root for you because they see that you're doing your best and you're trying to grow.
Yeah, the killer would be to try to hide it and to try, to not admit,
Mm.
to not be fully authentic about who you are and what you're doing. That can be a killer because usually in public speaking, what works is to do things fully. You need it's all or nothing that works well. So if you're not comfortable, either you fake it completely and you do something amazing. It's possible. It's one way. It can work. But if you don't do that, don't try to do half. I try to fake it, but not completely, and then it's kind of it's you
Inauthentic.
stumble and yeah, and people can feel when something is not complete, when it's just half.
Yeah, I think there's a very famous kind of sentiment that is don't half-ass something. And
Oh yeah,
if it comes to really being an expert at what you're doing, or just being a beginner but that's trying their best, either or is fine. But I think being inauthentic about what you are never plays well, and everyone can always tell.
yeah. I'm pretty sure you can generalize this concept to many things.
So listen, I'm curious because we started uh, with a lot of different areas, and we moved all over the map. But ultimately, what we both created this podcast for is to help people get inspired and learn something new. To close this out, I want to ask a really simple question that the answer is in three parts. What advice would you give to someone on the super introverted side of the scale? What advice would you give to someone who's on the super extroverted side of the scale? And what would you tell someone who doesn't exactly know where they fall, uh, or wants to learn more about how to get the best of both worlds?
Hmm. Yeah. So if you think you're very introverted, you need to know that what you want to achieve, it's skills. Everything that is social, talking to people or to an audience, those are skills. Forget everything about introversion. Everything is context dependent. You can change by doing things over and over. Start by things that are a little bit discomfort, but not too much, and do it step by step. If you are the other end of the spectrum, learn to ask questions, be curious about other people, make sure that everyone can talk, especially if you're in a meeting. If you take too much space in a meeting, make sure that other people can talk too. Because people who are quiet often have good ideas, but don't have the confidence to come with it because they don't have this skill of speaking in a meeting.
Mm.
And lastly, if you don't know about introversion and extroversion, my advice is don't try to learn about it because it's really flawed on many levels. And I saw it many times without proving having any bringing any proof. I can talk about two books if you want to go further. The first one is The End of Average. talks about how personality characteristics are flawed, how IQ tests are flawed, and how all the psychological constructs that we hear about are flawed also. Again, and the second book, unfortunately, it's in French, and I didn't find a translation. It's called Psychologie différentielle from Michel Hutto. Might be translatable nowadays. And this book really explains how you build a psychological construct, like an IQ test or a personality test. And by seeing how it's being built, you will see for yourself why I keep saying that all those measurements are flawed. And be careful, because most of the time it can be a limiting belief. Don't let any type of psychology characteristic define your identity and define what you can do or not do.
It's always great to hear that everything is a little squishy, and regardless of where you are, there's the capability for change. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your obsession with us. We love
My
learning.
pleasure.
Yeah, we love
100% my
learning more
pleasure.
about everything that comes with being a better professional, being a better person, and really learning to move mountains that we once had to climb. Listeners, thank you so much for joining us. You made it to the end. Make sure to like, subscribe, share it with a friend. We really couldn't do this without your support, and we appreciate everyone who tunes in. Thanks for catching Casually Pro. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!